Hey guys, welcome to Church Coffee, Christianity, Conservatism, Culture. I'm one of your hosts, Walter.
I'm your co-host Rob, and today we have a little round table review of Matt Walsh's documentary, Am I a
I am a
Racist?
racist.
So we've got Jessica Ote and Matt Henderson here, friends of the pod, and we will let the lady go first. First impressions.
So this is a movie that I literally don't think I could have sat through without other people in the room because he is so cringe when he is doing his cringe that it's painful. Like I find that kind of humor very disconcerting. I've never enjoyed it. Like I've never watched Borat and I never will. And for me, Matt Walsh gives off Borat vibes. But the thing about this film is that the insanity of the ideology of anti-racism is so insane that it's almost like you can't like this is the spoofing it isn't even as bad as it actually is. It's like his spoof really does has that function of bringing out how insane the people who are not pretending sound. And we were watching it and like what I keep saying? I said Trump's going to win. This is why Trump's going to win. And he won. So, 5 stars because the movie predicted. The movie shows you they should just put every Democrat who was on Kamala's campaign in a room and they should all watch that and they'll be like, oh, that's why we lost.
We'll unpack that later. Matt, first impressions.
Yeah, I'd echo much of what Jessica said. A cringe is the word that kept popping to my mind. It was a like I don't know that I would. It was an interesting movie. I half enjoyed it, but at the same time, it was a tough watch because that cringe was painful to get through. But I liked the movie in so much as I felt like I got something out of it. It was instructive. I appreciated kind of just like as kind of a live experiment or an ethnographic data point that this is this industry of anti-racist training. This is kind of what they do, right? And so in the way that I don't really like Borat much either. I feel like there's something unkind or disingenuous about sort of like misrepresenting yourself to kind of get people to make fools of themselves. But I don't think Walsh was misrepresenting what this industry does, um, and kind of seeing it for what it is. Yeah, like, and we'll unpack it. I've got a lot of thoughts. I also thought more than anything, I was really I valued being able to see the kind of people who are attracted to these, because I mean people are paying good money to go to these workshops, right? There wouldn't be an industry if there wasn't a market for it. That's what I found so interesting was who is going to these things, what are they paying for, and what are they getting out of it. And I've got some potentially cynical takes um, that might explain why that is. And I'd also sort of tease if we're going to understand why Trump won, kind of to piggyback off what Jessica said, I think we're going to have to understand what it is exactly that market wants in buying these programs in the first place. Yeah, I know that's all I'll say for now. We'll unpack that as we go.
I'm not gonna front. I turned it off. I can't do cringe. Like if I like when I'm trying to watch it, if I get up and run around because it's so cringy, I can't do that. I did not like his "Am I a Woman" video. Although I thought it was funny-ish. Now, granted, paying $30,000 to go to a seminar seems absolutely crazy to me. But I will teach people how not to be racist for $30,000 as well.
Jess and I watched it together. My impression was first and foremost just disbelief on the amount of money that goes into this. I will say I think Matt Walsh is not a kind person, and I think he's pretty uncharitable. And there are other words that I will use to describe him off this Christian-centered podcast that I won't do on a recording. That being said, there were several instances that we'll get into, discuss later, that I was actually kind of impressed at his ability to be pretty light on his feet. But there were other instances at like the dinner where he breaks a bunch of glasses and plates that I thought was about as forced as possible, and that wasn't it was cringe, but it wasn't funny cringe. It was just like, but we can get into that. Let's go back around Walter, you might be able to talk about this however far you got, but what was your like kind of favorite point moment in the film? Jess, why don't you go first?
So my favorite moment was when I think he was in, he was somewhere, I want to say it was in New Orleans, but now I feel like I'm remembering it wrong. But he goes around and he talks to this black guy who's clearly an immigrant from some, I want to say like Caribbean or Caribbean adjacent country, probably.
Probably
Anyway,
Haiti or
it could have been
Barbados or something.
Haiti.
Yeah.
Haiti was my next guess. And this man who clearly has never been, he's not middle class, but he's not poor, he's not destitute. I think he has his own business probably. And he thinks America's a dream come true. He thinks it's paradise because he has freedom, he has the ability to make a living, and people in his environment are nice to him. He doesn't go to Europe. He's not worried about like what people are wearing or what pronouns people are using. He's just a very simple, not simple in a naive sense, but his life is very much he's a believer. He's a Christian. He talks a little bit about the Bible. He is an example of the success of this nation. Like in 99.9, well, 99.9, in like 85% of the world, his story is not possible. You can't just come here from nowhere and be free and make something yourself and get along with people. That's really rare. And it's a uniquely American story. And so, like, the Democrats are the victims of their own success because here they are, the people they claim to care about and represent, like, they've actually done it. Hello, civil rights worked. Hello, you don't have people saying people with different skin color can't go to the same public school. Like, hello, we won. And now they want to act like it's still like genocide and slavery. Like, if you walk out the door and it's the 1619 Project, come on. It's like they're making it up. And that moment demonstrates so clearly that like the thing they're trying to tell you isn't true. It's beautiful also because like that's the thing he wasn't really able to do in this In What Is Woman. He wasn't able to draw back and bring out the sort of like beautiful sort of quiet truth. He was able to restrain himself and have those moments of like truly what I would call devout patriotism in the film. And that was my favorite moment.
Matthew, favorite moment?
Favorite moment. Probably my favorite moment, which maybe I don't need to say much about. I just kind of like the at the very end where the black waitress said, "Bless your heart," because that's I just spent 7 years in the South, and that yeah, that's about right. Like if you get out of pocket, somebody will call you on it by saying "Bless your heart," and that kind of puts you in your place. Um, I think the most valuable moment, it was really a series of moments. I just couldn't get over watching the people who attend these seminars, right? Watching kind of the way, like, so I'm a sociologist, sociologically watching them sort of manage identity in real time in a setting that's not, that you don't really have good normative scripts for. You don't really know how you're supposed to behave in those settings. So watching people kind of like try and assume uh, uh, a way of being on the fly, particularly when like you've signed up for a person of color basically to condemn you, and then watching them just sort of like in various ways sort of self-flagellate happily, right? That it was like watching some kind of religious ritual for devotees of wokeism would be the easy way to label it, but like it's clearly religious to me. And so as a sociologist of religion, I'm like, my goodness, what is this thing that they're doing? Why would people sign up for this? Why, what's going on here? And I go back to religion because it's only in religion where I see this kind of behavior happen with any kind of regularity. But usually people don't sign up for self-flagellation unless at least my theory is unless they're getting something for it. And I think they're getting something for it. So that was interesting.
Walter, why don't you first tell listeners how far you watched and then what
Oh
was
man,
your part of that?
yeah, how far did we get? I probably got 30 minutes in, and then I was like, I just can't do this. So let's see here. There was the intro, which I really thought was where he goes to the news ladies first and invites them to stretch out and stretch their whiteness and whatever else. I'll just say this. all the whole land naming where you acknowledge that people who came before. And again, I work for university. I was, you know, people are into that. I don't understand it. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. But whatever. Then they went to the black lady who was like condemning them in the little classroom. Then he talked to the black folks in the South. He was talking to this black man at an auto mechanic shop. That's about. Oh, then I fast forwarded and I started looking at the dinner scene. I was just like, this is just too much. Like this is
Yeah, that I mean
uh,
that was rough.
it was I can't. It's just not okay. So, but I would say this. I I I thought a part that I thought was interesting is, and I'll just go back to the scene where everyone was in the circle and I think he said something like, "Yeah, people say I have enough black friends, or I have like 17 black friends or whatever." I thought that was funny, but I thought it was interesting where the lady she was like, "Hey, I come from a Christian background, but you know, patience is not okay. Peace is like some of the Christian virtues that she was that like, hey, those are okay, but in this, it's just not okay." And then I was like, I can't watch this. I'm just gonna go to bed angry if I keep this.
Fair. Yeah, I would echo Jess's. I think he was Haitian. He owned a auto body shop, I think in New Orleans, also definitely somewhere in the deep south. Yeah, the kind of quiet moment. He had sort of a moment like that in What Is a Woman when he went to Africa and they're all like kind of making fun, but that was still like that to me felt also very forced in What Is a Woman. I thought it would have been better if he just went to the ghetto or rural Appalachia somewhere, still in the same country, but clearly could be a completely separate country at the same time. But I actually have to say I enjoyed the kind of first intro lesson, if only because they found him out, which I thought was funny. His antics there were probably the best tightrope out of any of the film. The rest of it, he just goes a little bit too extreme in any circumstance. Besides when he goes and talks to people at the biker bar or the Haitian, I think he's a Haitian body mechanic. We'll kick it back to Jess with next round of question. What do you think? And you've already alluded to this, Jess, but what do you think this film was made for? What do you think the producer, director, and Matt Walsh would hope people get out of this? What is the Steel Man version of this film that is hoping to make an impact? And I think it has. I mean, I think it's the highest grossing documentary of 2024. I think it was shot on a budget of $3 or $4 million and it's earned almost 20 million. So, I mean, pretty solid success that one, all things considered.
I mean, I think there's two aspects of this sort of aspiration, or what I infer is the goal of this movie. One is that it's a scam. Just the money that is involved in this business of claiming racism everywhere is significant. And Americans are like gullible as they're probably the most gullible people on the planet, but they're also the most fickle. So when you tell people that they're getting scammed, they tend to be like, no, don't scam me anymore. And a lot of this is a scam. I mean, it has huge academic. I mean, he didn't really talk about the academic impacts of this, really. I mean, he implied them because I guess he mentions Kennedy's book, right? And that comes up in the beginning, I think. Because my nickname for Ibram X. Kendi is Ibram Cash Kendi, where instead of the X, you write a dollar sign. Because it's a grift. I mean,
Well, and the fact that Robin DiAngelo's, I just can't believe they got her to sit down. Like,
I can. Your most
well, I mean,
present thought is
yeah.
your most present reality is your most frequent thought, or your right the other way around. She lives in that world. She thinks it's real. And the other motivation, I think, comes from Walsh's political standpoint. And as a political commentator, I agree. I'll try to restrain my language since the context of this podcast. But I mean, she doesn't seem like a very. I think that you used the right word, Rob. He doesn't seem like a very charitable person. And it's like for someone who's very like can I say aggressively Christian? Like that doesn't, it's like, I don't think that puts his, it's not my idea of Christianity. Not like everyone has to have the same idea, but like charity's pretty up there, you know?
I think it kind of, charity might be one of those. We didn't have a charitable God. I don't think we wouldn't be sitting in a good position. So I would,
Exactly.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
like,
So, but from his political standpoint, people who espouse this ideology are actually dangerous. And I think one of the things that and I actually happen to agree that a lot of these far left ideas are very damaging. And so I think there's part of it where he's like, I want to expose this grift. But there's also like a legitimate part where he realizes these ideas are bad for America. They make people not like each other. And so, like, maybe part of his Christian ethos is coming through despite himself. Because what he's really trying to say is that, like, if we fight about these things, we're going to have civil war. And that would suck. And, there's this moment in the film, in the dinner scene, where one of the women is like, we're going to burn it all down. And it's like, yeah. And that's how you're going to elect Democrats? No, you're not. Americans aren't going to let you do that.
But to explain this dinner scene, there's Sarah Rao and her business partner that does these race to like the number two dinner, where they basically berate white women for like $5,000 a plate, and they get it. I mean, they get after it, which is why that scene could have been better if Walsh had kind of let it just play. But how do you think this message should have come across, is coming across?
Yeah, or yeah, like what was the purpose, right? I think my charitable read, I mean, Walsh he's a reformed shock jock, you know what I mean? Like he's a radio prankster who found God. And I kind of feel like, like once a shock jock, always a shock jock. I felt that coming throughout everything he's doing. I'll see him on YouTube clips every now and then, and yeah, it's that's just kind of how he's approaching it. He's pugilistic. Um, he happy warrior. He enjoys the sparring. um, he seems at his happiest when he's unhappy about the state of things. So that's sort of my take on his temperament. I think to the extent that there's a noble objective in a movie like this, I think he's trying to warn people, right, that this is going on. I think there's a tendency to not believe the extent that these things are going on, right? Like if I had described what we saw in the documentary to someone who was incredulous, would they believe it, right? Like, I mean, obviously there's like, nah, come on, you're exaggerating. um and I feel like just in academia, I feel like I've had conversations like that where I sort of describe what I think is going on, and even people who are arguing these things, they wouldn't. I don't think they would necessarily agree with the characterization when you sort of present it back to them. So there's something valuable. Yeah, I think there's something valuable about trying to sort of like reduce the argument to its absurd proportions with a mirror that sort of reflects it back. That said, I don't know how many progressives this is going to convince, because they're all in, but I'm not sure that's what he's really interested in doing, right? I think I won't go so far as to say it's propaganda, but I don't think it's particularly artful. I don't necessarily mean that as a criticism. But it skews more towards propaganda as a way to sort of say, hey, if you don't think this is right, if you think this stuff is crazy, here's a documentary to show you how right you are, so you don't have to feel like you're crazy. You can feel actually you're quite sane. This is in fact crazy. And I can kind of confirm some of your deepest suspicions. People who are sort of persuadable, I think, will see this and they'll be persuaded. But yeah, to your point, is he charitable? No, 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 I don't think so. But I don't know too many satirists who are.
Yeah, I think that's the worst case about this film, is that you can't really come to it without, like, if you did this entire film the exact same way and just took out Matt Walsh and put in Joe Everyman, some sort of like lower level comic or something like that, would be more palatable to a progressive audience. I think it could have.
Go
If
ahead.
Stephen Colbert was still in his conservative Bill O'Reilly, Stephen Colbert show and did this movie,
Oh, it'd be killer.
it would $100 million.
But that's why. But Stephen Colbert wouldn't do this movie anymore because like, I almost get the sense that Stephen Colbert, like contemporary Stephen Colbert, feels guilty for the old character, right? Like the Comedy Central
Yeah,
character.
absolutely.
Because the thing
That's
is,
sad because the
he's
old character was the best thing about him.
well, it was hilarious and it was also really artful in that it kind of made people think sort of creatively and nimbly about where these, like, what these different viewpoints mean and these different perspectives. The problem is it's bad propaganda because you can't control where the thinking goes once you sort of provoke people to think.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's not what Colbert is into now, because Colbert, and this will hint at where I ultimately want to go, because right now Colbert, he's an elite, he's part of the system, he rubs shoulders with high-ranking members of the DNC. He's a propagandist now, and it's a bummer, right? Because he used to be hilarious.
Yeah. Agreed.
Walter, main thoughts about if this movie could reach unreachable people, whether they are right or left of the aisle.
Oh, I'm not as smart as you guys. From even just the commercial and what I know and have seen on Matt Walsh and even understanding of what I know about the Daily Wire, I'm like, I would agree. I think Matt, you said it. It's going to be for those who were like, I knew this crazy crap was happening. I told you so. I told you so. I would say this when I watched the whole thing again, the first clip, whatever, when the lady was taking them through the seminar, I was like, there's no way people are paying for this. Why would someone pay for a black woman or whatever to come and tell them all these terrible things? I'm like, and to be fair, where I'm at, I don't like the victimization. Don't make me a victim. I know what's happened in the past. I get it. Don't make me a victim of that.
If you want to feel guilty about something, go convert and be an Irish Catholic. It's free.
So, yeah. Again, do I think it's gonna liberals are gonna convert or stop? No. Yeah, no. But I would say this real quick, completely tangential. I did think it was hilarious how he was talking to that one lady. He's like, "Hey, can my white daughter be Moana and dress up as Moana for Halloween?" It's
No,
kind of like,
but also if she doesn't, she's a racist,
yeah, yeah, right, right.
and you're a racist.
So I would from
So how dare you, Walter?
so sorry, so sorry. But from my perspective, I
But
like
don't
whenever I walk in.
apologize, but also don't own it, because
Whenever I walk into movie things like this or any of these type of conversations, I'm like, look, we're all sinners, okay, and we need Jesus at the end of the day. And I'm going to do my best not to be racist, and I'm going to do my best not to be anti-immigrant or whatever the case may be. I'll do my best and just help me as I.
Walter, being black man, do you think DEI is good for the country?
No, I can't stand DEI. Sorry, hold on. That's just my gut reaction. So, do I think it's good? Diversity, equity, inclusion. I do think you need to know history. You do need to understand how history has impacted things. I do think you need to be aware of your biases and blind spots, all that good stuff. It's okay to acknowledge it. It's okay to say it exists, whatever. We can do better. But at the same time, don't limit me to the history and to whatever history you think those actions are going to limit me to. Like, I do not want, I don't care who you are. Don't limit me. Don't use DEI to make me feel to try to baby me or anything of that nature. Like, so does that answer your question? Probably not. I don't think we need to go, I don't think we need to go shaming people for, um, whatever positions they are in. Yes, we could say, hey, the reason why these things are the way they are is because XYZ. Okay, I get
But are
it.
you are
Or
you going to get online certified to be a DEI instructor so you can get paid $20,000 per
if someone wants to
session?
pay me $20,000 a bitch at them, then sure, why not? I will take your $20,000. No, I'm not going to do all that. No, I don't. DEI can be good if it's done in the right way. I don't like the way, from what I can understand, I don't like the way liberals do it, but I don't know that right wing or ultra conservative people know how to do it either. I'm not a help. I apologize.
That's great. We wanted your opinion. But Jess, you have already alluded several times this film is why Trump won. And I would maybe somewhat agree. The Democratic internal polling put the number one reason why Kamala Harris lost was the economy. Number two was border. Number three was the country is going in the wrong direction. Why don't you unpack why you think Trump won and why this film is a good example of that?
Because race politics are dead. I mean, that's the TLDR. I mean, that's a very short explanation. And this film just proves that when you try to turn a win into a loss, you lose your advantage. I mean, the Democrats legitimately historically are the party of civil rights, and where you stood on civil rights basically set the political map for since the 1960s. Like, I mean, was it Johnson who was like, who was it who like after the passage of the bill like says this is going to cost me the presidency?
Yeah, it's like we're signing away the South for the next 40 years.
Yeah, okay, Nixon. Yeah, him, that guy, and he was absolutely right.
Mhm.
But this was that's the I mean that's the beauty. Like you know that the 19th Amendment that gave women the right to vote was passed by men. So the idea that people can't learn to take the side of someone they're of a political constituency that they're not is false. It's very false. Like
Roe v. Wade
hun
was passed
hundreds
by all men.
hundreds of thousands of people died in the Civil War who were not black. So this idea that we can't have like civic ideas that transcend identity is demonstrably false. In fact, if you teach people history, you learn it. You learn that very thing. So the idea that the Democrats are consistently trying to say that the country is still a bastion of racist dysfunction is just asinine. It's untrue on its face. And so this movie
Well,
shows that that is the case. It's not true. And people are not going to vote for a party that's claiming something that's not true. I mean,
well,
which
that's what I'm
is
saying.
ironic because Trump lies. He opens his mouth, he lies. But it's not the same kind of lie. It's lying about the past is different than lying about the future. They're totally psychologically different.
I don't know. I think that again, I know this isn't about why Democrats lost and whatnot, but you can't lean so heavy into oppression, oppression, oppression. You just can't do that. Like that's not going to. There's nothing hopeful about it. There's nothing. What am I trying to say, Jessica? I'm trying to say
I think you're trying to say it's they're trying to claim there's to fix a problem that doesn't exist.
I'm not saying the problem doesn't exist. I just don't think it's probably not as bad as what they're trying
That's what I
to.
mean, the systemic problem.
Yeah,
Because
the
there
ship is not going down. Yes, there's a couple of leaks, but the ship is
well,
not going down,
the
people.
irony is that America used to have institutionalized systemic racism. It was in the law. No one is going to deny that. Now they're trying to claim when we don't have that, when it doesn't exist in law, they're trying to claim that it's everywhere. And it's like, you can't have, it's like, that's a Kafkaesque trap
But
because you're
that
saying, oh, it's
and
not
so
in the
that
law. You took it out of the law, but it's still there. It's like, well,
but
we
that's where
live
it
in a
goes to
society
like
of
just
laws.
well in my mind it goes back to just people are it just goes to the sinful person. Like we're sinful. We make decisions and do things against one another based off of preconceived notions and beliefs, and we do wrong to each other. I don't think that it's just oh my God, I sound like those people where it's like it's just sin. It's our own sin. Anyways, this is
Well, no, I
Well,
think
well, I
that's
think
exactly where we should go with this conversation because I think that's exactly relevant. I
well,
think you've hit on it precisely.
and I think to those people's points, like if there is some systematic things, it's certainly at a tertiary level, but you still have instances both of like interpersonal relation or racism, or you have, they still run studies where they'll submit the same resume, but it's a different name on top. Okay, is that structural? I would say not. It's still cultural. It's still a problem that we need to check our
cultural. Yeah.
biases. I'm not going to speak to Walter, but when Walter and I read Reading While Black, a book about racism in the church. The author related about the talk his dad gave him. Author is black, and just be like, hey, if you ever get pulled over by the police, you got to be careful, do exactly as they say, because I think that's personally
Well,
still
so
overblown, but at the same
yeah,
time,
yeah. I
there's
honestly, and
still
as I
there's still
think,
inconsistencies there that
yeah,
may or may not be structural. Matt can probably speak to those better, but
yeah, and I think there's probably things that were coming from the 50s, 60s that like my great grandfather went through, my dad grew up, that probably aren't as crazy as they were, or they're not as bad as they used to be.
well, I mean, Walter, your marriage is case in point in that. Like, you guys celebrate Loving Day, like that was illegal until 1962. And
Loving day is every day for us. Just
do you like this might be a little bit too personal, but do you guys get set long glances or like bad looks on the regular? You've talked on this podcast that you every now and then you do, which
yeah,
is
every now and
very,
then, but
very unfortunate. But at the same time, like you don't have people burning crosses on your front yard because you have biracial children.
yeah, no, that's so that's what I'm saying. Like society has come a long way. Again, it doesn't mean individuals aren't racist, and it doesn't mean that there's not ways that individuals do things that become systematic in a sense. But at the same time, I'm like, maybe I'm living in a shelter because I'm like, we all have really good opportunities here in America. So again, I
What Walter and Jessica have both alluded to, and Matt's directly said it. Thank you for waiting your turn, Matt. You've been very patient, but Matt already kind of intro the wokeness DEI as a religious ideology. Walter's already said it's a sin, just said let's move in that direction. So Matt, how do you as a religious sociologist interpret this and make your claim?
I mean, we're talking about like something like what actually Karl Marx would call a total ideology, right? We're talking about a narrative framework that sort of makes the world make sense. But I'm actually kind of so I've alluded to this, and I'm going to go ahead and sort of try and like build an argument. Okay, so stay with me here. In 2016, the book that came out that explained Trump and that election was Hillbilly Elegy, JD Vance's book. We didn't know it at the time that was going to sort of have the political ramifications it did, that it would launch his career. But the people who were sort of most excited about that book in like late 16, early 17 were liberals, because they felt like, okay, this is a book that sort of speaks to a kind of structural, cultural, economic reality that might be sort of simmering under the surface, that sort of explains resentment, Rust Belt decline, sort of the decline of institutions in large sectors of the United States. Okay, so here's what I'm going to make a prediction, and this is kind of where my head's at, but I don't know how to say his name, unfortunately, but I've been following some of his writings for the last couple of years. There's a sociologist named Musa al-Gharbi. He's got a book out that's just come out. It's called "We Have Never Been Woke: The Cultural Contradictions of a New Elite." I just got it today. I'm really excited to read it. There's a Thomas Chatterton Williams review of it in the Atlantic that's out like over the last couple of days. I'm excited about this book because I think it's potentially going to speak to a lot of the same dynamics that sort of speak to what's going on in the 2024 election. And I think it speaks back to what the heck Walsh was capturing with this documentary. Okay, so why are these people going to these parties and paying through the teeth to be yelled at by women of color? What the heck is going on? Ultimately, I think that this is actually class warfare by a different name. Who is the audience for going to you know what I mean? Like if you're going to these workshops to sort of self-flagellate, I don't like, who are you? It's performative, right? But who are you performing for? You're performing for the other white people in the room who are educated and wealthy enough to take time out of their work day to sort of trade in the cultural signifiers and the symbolists of, I know the right terms. I know the ideas I'm supposed to have. I've been to the right seminars. I went to the right schools. I've got the right ideas. And these are all the ideas that are sort of connected to ascendance in the creative or the managerial class. So you're jumping into these little, I don't know, these little workshops So you can acquire sort of this cultural capital, but it's ultimately it's for elites to trade on elite status. It's a status contest for elites to kind of try and one up one another to gain access to greater opportunities within the elite meritocracy. So working class people, so you think like, okay, Walter, you're a black man, why does all of this stuff hit you so tone deaf? It's probably because you're too working class, right? What do you do for a living? Remind me.
I build homes.
Yeah, right. What are you talking about? Like
Yeah.
that's not you don't do any coding building home.
No.
Well, I don't know, maybe you do.
No, there's no coding.
But do you
No.
know what I mean? Like, so you're spending all your time. I assume you spend plenty of your time with people of color, not just out, like just not just in your family, but like on like in your work world, right?
Yeah.
Do
In
they?
Texas, typical subs
That's what
going
I'm
to be
saying.
people of color.
Do they
Yeah.
trade like I? So probably a lot of Hispanics. Do they say Latinx?
No, they ain't got time for that.
No, of course not. They don't. So so the whole thing, like the reason the Trump commercial that you guys probably saw where Kamala's like Trump's for you, Harris is for they, them.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the three reasons you mentioned, Rob, earlier about why people voted for Trump. This is not my idea. I think I can't remember where I heard it.
Those three reasons were according to internal DNC polling.
No, so like I believe that, but also the trans commercial is actually the perfect summary and encapsulation. It's not just that like trans rights issues may strike a lot of people strange.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if my sense is that most people in the United States want to live and let live. What they don't want to do is elevate trans issues over inflation. They
Yeah.
don't, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
you can
absolutely.
live and let live, but you better keep the price of milk down.
Yes.
Or and if you don't, that's
I have
basic, like that's just governmental malpractice. And I
I
don't
have a
care.
lot. I have a lot. I've got my fair amount of both. I've got three people I can name off the top of my head that are MAGA all in. And I know a bunch of people who voted for Trump, held their nose, voted for Trump. They didn't like him. They just were assuming his policies were going to be better fit to their personalities and political ideology. But I can tell you without a doubt, those people do not want trans identifying people pre-op, post-op, however you want to define a trans person. They do not want those people to be without homes. They do not want those people to be fired because they are trans. They do not want those people to be denied food or shelter. Those people probably want trans people to be denied a certain bathroom. For the most part, MAGA and even Trump people are motivated anti-trans, from my understanding, is no biological men in sports and keep your hands off my kids. Go forth
Yeah.
and do whatever the hell you want.
But
Yeah.
the clip that they used for that commercial was Kamala Harris speaking to an insulated group. She was speaking shibboleths to her, like she was doing the kind of like a political grandstanding version of this prestige game that I'm talking about.
Mm.
And so the clip resonates because people are like, what, seriously, what the heck is she talking about? Like what, even Charlemagne the God, like they used his clip in the commercial of him on his podcast saying, I don't want to pay for that. Like, because of course you don't want to pay for that. Because it's like, it doesn't resonate. It doesn't resonate with the lived experiences of most people outside of this kind of like elite academic status game. And it's certainly, I can't remember the other thing I was going to say. It doesn't resonate. Like it's off-putting. It's like, seriously, what are you talking about?
Well,
Oh yeah. The other thing is it absolutely doesn't address their material concerns, right? Winning at this conversation is not going to like, so, okay. So go back to the Walsh video. If you go to one of these seminars, honestly, I'm at a loss to understand how any of these seminars, and I would include Kendi's book and I would include D'Angelo's book. I don't know
What
how
about
any of
Ta-Nehisi
those.
Coates' book?
We can. I just we can come back to that. But those I don't know how those seminars are improving material conditions for people of color. Not I don't you know what I mean? And furthermore, D'Angelo in particular is like, these are structural and there's nothing you can do about it. but also you have to work on yourself so you can fix problems that are structural and beyond you anyways. Honestly, like I don't understand. I don't understand what their objective. You were asking a question about what is Walsh trying to accomplish. I don't understand what D'Angelo is trying to accomplish or Kendi is trying to accomplish, other than trying to win at this status game in elite circles.
I will say one more thing about I do think that that ad is largely anti-trans, if we want to call it that. I think it also, the ad is good in a marketing sense because it also works on another level. Like it's like Harris is for they, them. She's for this minority, and also she's for the elite parlor vocabulary game, right? So it works on a few different levels, which is really good marketing. Is it anti-trans or is it pro-elitist? Yes. Walter, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I was like, Rob, this is getting above my degree and GPA.
Well,
So
we need the straight men to our two people who have PhDs. A good place to end this conversation would be instead of these people leading $20,000, $30,000, $60,000 workshops, where do you think that money should be going?
I have no idea. I mean, I think it like for me, it's like, okay, you want to change things. Let's work on housing.
Walter
Let's work.
Scott Holmes. You put it into Walter Scott Holmes. You help a
Well,
working class biracial family put breakfast on the table.
there you go. I think I don't know again because I'm with like working. I gotta say working class people. Although plenty of the subs I work with have plenty of money. They're not just working class. They're doing even though they're doing trades work, they're doing really well for themselves. I don't know what instead of telling people to feel sorry that they're white or whatever, you can say, hey, how do you use your position? How do you empower? How do you encourage? How do you even from a Christian charitable, not charitable, but even from a Christian perspective, how do you do really well with where you are, but consider what does it mean to live generously? What does it mean to live sacrificially? I don't think we need to be berating people for past mistakes and all that other stuff. I think we need to say, okay, hey, we know where we've been. Let's chart out a hopeful path forward. And this is what we can do. Here's what a beautiful America could look like. XYZ. How in the world do trans rights, which whatever, okay, do you? That's whatever. Why in the world does it always get equated to like civil rights? Like you know what I'm saying? It's just like
It's
there
because
was
of gay
this.
rights. It's because gay rights was compared to civil rights. That's why.
Well,
Well, and
that's what I'm
because
saying.
it worked, Walter,
That's the
the
issue.
civil
Is it
rights movement
work?
worked.
And that's why
And
we're in
then
this
it
mess because race and sex aren't interchangeable.
But even the civil rights movement isn't very good at sort of dealing with structural realities that are not formalized.
But a lot of people realize that the reason that racism in a broad pervasive sense in America could be, significantly reduced if not eliminated is because people actually did realize that it was stupid to arbitrarily assume something about somebody by the color of their skin. Racism was real and it did exist and we had institutionalized racism and we had a legal system of racism. But we also at the same time and these two imply each other, we were completely in a culture together. We were not strangers. Like the horror of owning other people is one of the parts of that horror is that intimacy. There is an
Hmm.
American culture that
Hmm.
includes the fact that slavery breeds intimacy. Like literally. I mean, it's horrible to think, but I mean, people made people from people that
I'm
they
a
owned,
product. I'm a
right?
product of that.
That all really happened. And so this idea that it's like people actually saw the truth that that skin color was an arbitrary way to talk about people. People experienced that reality. There is never going to come a point where people are going to be like, yeah, it's really true. A man can turn into a woman. That's never happening. So it's the discourse of civil rights doesn't work if the thing you're trying to argue for is false. Like nobody ever talks about that. The reason that you can reduce racism is because it's actually true that people are not the color of their skin. It's true. Like there's a truth value operation going on here. And the Democrats just think that it's all truth by assertion. That's this whole postmodern thing that whatever you say is real is real. It's like, no, sorry, not true. And that was basically the point where like that changed my whole life. This discourse about like trans rights or civil rights, it changed my whole life. It literally exploded my worldview. And it did that because I'm not a liberal because everything, just because you make it up, it's true. I'm a liberal because I believe in truth, in reality.
You know
So
what? You know what? I think that's a good mic drop moment.
Yeah. Okay, hold on.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this rousing discussion on Am I a Racist? We'll see you all next week for another rousing discussion of church coffee. Our album art was done by my wife, and our theme music was composed by TJ Stokes.